Burns. Okay, welcome to the Lewiston Public Works Advisory Commission's regular meeting, October 16, 2024, at the Bell Building, second floor. And I'm going to call this meeting to order. And the first thing on the agenda is citizens' comments. And I do not see any citizens, so we will move on to the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine by the commission and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussions on these issues unless the commissioner so requests, in which case we will remove the item from the consent agenda and consider it under the items moved from the consent agenda. There is only one item on there, and that's the approval of September 18, 2024 meeting minutes.
You'll have to table that. You don't have enough voting members here right now.
Okay. So I need to go back to announcing you, correct?
Yep.
All right, that's what I was supposed to do. All right, so we're going to move on and come back to these other things. We're going to have the director's report.
Director's report. So I'll talk slowly to give Councilor Forsman time to get here. I gave this update before we were in session here, but since we're being recorded and I know people do watch these, so the update is we were planning on coming back to this board in November to give a lead and copper rule update. And the update is the state of Idaho DEQ has given us a 3-year reprieve on some of the secondary action items that we need to do. So I provided an update to city council. It was October, it was this month, right? And kind of laid out generally the federal mandate for identifying lead service lines within our inventory. We currently have 4,700 and change of unknown material types. So we have a work plan moving forward to identify all those. Generally, and I had a meeting with Lloyd yesterday. There's lead is not a prevalent material type that's been used in local plumbing here. So not terribly concerned about it, but as a federal mandate, you have to prove that. So we're under the same mandate as anybody else, whether they have 0% copper, lead, or 100% copper pipes. We have to, or lead pipes. We have to show that. So we're moving forward in identifying the service line types, and we have a public outreach campaign called Lead Free Lewiston. So volunteers can provide us information on what they have on their service type. We're going to proceed ahead with that, but the secondary actions like water sampling and identifying potential other areas that are more sensitive, like daycares and schools. The rules are being updated and more direction needs to be provided from the state DEQ. And so they have said they will provide that by 2027. So I was going to provide an update to this board next month in November, but given the information that came out last night, we will probably not have that. I gave you basically all the updates, so I don't have any more. And if something changes, we can update it. So I'm not sure. I usually like to try and plan these meetings out 2-3 months in advance, but I can't remember the other item that we had tabled or had scheduled for this. But I'm losing topics as I queue them up and get them ready. Things change, and so we may consider canceling either November or December just because of a lack of information to provide. But as we get the packet prepared for next month in December, we'll let the board know if we have information to share. But those are two months. Typically, we have a hard time getting a quorum for November Thanksgiving and December for Christmas. So not the worst months to worry about. Other item, I apologize, I don't have my calendar in front of me. The Main Street project is moving head full of steam moving forward. We have the designs getting close. So the concept is basically get to a concept design, 10% design. Let the public kind of take a look at that. We'll have some good I shouldn't say good estimates, but we'll have estimates that are based off of the design and current construction costs. At that point, we could go out for a bond. We could leverage that in for some federal grants, or we could sit on it. I think the direction we've been going on is to go out for a GO bond. And as I've told this group, the GO bond is built, the payments for the GO bond, general obligation bond, payments are built into our current budget. We're putting away in the neighborhood of about $2 million a year for arterial reconstruction. So that $2 million, if you're looking at doing a significant arterial reconstruction, can be 20, 30, 40, 50, $60 million. So if you're putting $2 a year away, you're chasing inflation. And so a GO bond would allow us to take that $2 million a year and put that into the payment for that. So you basically invest your capital at that point and then pay that bond off. That's what we've got set up for the wastewater plant and water plant right now. It's pretty common practice, but we need, in the state of Idaho, for a GO bond, we need to get the voters' approval. So we're weighing those options. There's a lot of maintenance, deferred maintenance on arterials specifically to be addressed in the next 20 years. So I'm kind of trying to get, as we get feedback through the process, trying to redirect the message. If it's not Main Street, which is really has some water issues and sewer issues and stormwater issues, and everything, sidewalk vaults and planters and all that other stuff. So that has been identified as a #1 priority. So that's where we put our effort. If we go to a GO bond and the citizens say absolutely not, we'll pivot and go somewhere else. Never mind that we still have ARPA dollars that we need to spend to address those water lines downtown. So we need to get investing in this infrastructure. And so we need the citizens' help to, one, guide us into how we were going to pay for it, and two, tell us what exactly they want when we build it. And we're doing our best to get out there, town halls, public meetings. We were out at Art Walk last weekend before last. We've gone to basically every public event that we can to get comments. And we're there every event. It may not be Main Street, maybe the CIP, it may be the comp plan that we did. So we're trying to get feedback. Sometimes it's easier than others, but it just depends on the project. So Main Street is kind of consuming a lot of our time. And with that, I think we now have a quorum.
All right. Okay. I don't know, I just get low. Do you have a question if it's appropriate?
Sure.
So you're already promoting these things at all that you can. And is the big push going to start in like January? And what role does this group play?
Yeah, that is a great question. It will be, I'm actually meeting with the mayor tomorrow to talk about here's what we've got, because we're probably 3/4 of the way through the design public engagement component. We've gotten some feedback on the local businesses, local property owners, all the Main Street people are very, everybody's cautious about any construction, about the impacts of their businesses. But I think generally people are very supportive of, I want to see this going. There's businesses that have been down here for 100 years that have been talking about redeveloping Main Street for decades. So let's do it. I think the concern is, how do we communicate this message to the rest of the city? Particularly the orchards. The orchards, I know, I talk to them weekly that they feel like they've gotten a short end of the stick, that everything is downtown, everything's focused on this, and this. And so whether we broaden our approach and say, hey, like I just said, we have infrastructure that needs to be addressed. If it's Thane, it's Thane. If it's Bryden, it's Bryden. If it's Main Street, all three of those streets need investment in the next 20 years. So if you don't want us to start with Main Street, we can pivot. We can go to Thane. We just are in the process of adopting the Thane corridor study. So on top of that, The city for any bond isn't able to, campaign. We can tell you the facts, just like the SRF for the wastewater plants. We can say, here's what the debt would be, here's the loans, here's where the revenue would come from, and here's the impact to the city budget. We can do that. Here's the facts. Here's what the street would look like. Here's the sewer, here's the water, but we can't say it's a great idea or it's a bad idea or point any direction. I think that's where this board, starting probably in January is, does this concept float? I mean, we have to run this by bond attorneys who are saying, they look at it by Idaho law and say, well, you can't use this word, you gotta use this word, but I can bring, concepts to this body and say, does this make sense to you? Is this of value to you? Does this help you understand what we're trying to accomplish? And I think, this body has, it was just like, we had a debrief after we met on the Main Street project and with the Melissa, the engineer, and she's like, oh yeah, the concepts of, we had not considered the left turns out of the bypass, backing up traffic there, because there's only enough queues for three cars. So that's where we're looking to, we look at these things over and over and over, and we kind of get blinded by the trees in the forest. So that's, I think, where we're gonna go with this group.
Especially since we may not have a meeting between now and January. That's why I was asking that question. And so even if we need to have a special meeting just for that, we can do that.
We could, yeah, if anything was on the agenda in December, it more than likely would be a Main Street Q&A update, something where we would want to try out or introduce you to a design component or a messaging or something like that. So it would, Main Street would probably be the most likely thing to come back for you by the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. That answers my questions. I know we can't get too deep into that at your time.
I just had a quick question if everybody can hear me.
We can.
We're good.
Yeah.
Great. Hi, everybody. It's Laura. You said you did get a chance to talk with the consultant, so you did look at the turn and it was a 3-car stack. What about the parking? Is that being looked at again so that can be kind of addressed? Because I think that was one of our biggest concerns was the parking.
Yeah, parking above everything else. It's funny. Parking is the biggest thing that we've gotten feedback on, and it is it's like the Hippocratic oath: do no harm. So lose no parking spaces. And actually, we had a meeting last week, our check-in, and talking about some of the side streets and coming up with some alternative angled parking, like on 3rd here. And the way our building is laid out, sidewalks so wide, so we could modify 3rd and way the buses are going away. So we've looked at some alternative parking layouts, and then lane layouts for Main and D. So yes, parking will be probably front and center of any design that's presented out, because the property or the business owners are adamant that parking cannot be lost.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Right. So I should move on or go back. Yeah.
To go to the consent.
Consent agenda. So the only thing on the consent agenda is approval of September 18, 2024 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, or do you want to have that removed and discussed? I need a motion.
I'm making a motion to approve the consent agenda as is.
Thank you. I have a second.
I'll second.
All right. Oh, I see. You should have said, yeah, recuse yourself. All right, that's perfect. Okay, so the consent agenda, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And we have one abstaining. All right, then moving on to number 4, the director's report we did. So you got to hear that already. And on to 5, the active agenda, draft policy, temporary traffic control in the right of way. And I think we have Mr. Luke to come and help us here today.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm gonna try.
You will. You'll help.
Haley, can I borrow the? Sure. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I am Luke Antonich, the city engineer, and here to talk to you about our temporary traffic control in the right-of-way policy that we are developing. So this is a draft that you're getting to see. There we go. So today the outline is really simple. I'm going to go over some background and then we'll talk some about the policy and how that works. And an obligatory Dilbert because he is the best engineer in the world. Background. So the authority for requiring or what would the word managing temporary traffic control comes from chapters 31 and 35 of the city code. There's chapter 31 specifically requires warnings and barricades for any work being performed in the right of way. And then it provides the authority to Public Works to manage that. And then there's also chapter 35 deals with kind of more permanent signage, but signage in the right of way comes out of chapter 35 as well and requires adherence to the signs that are placed in the right of way. Some background. The past practices, we have not had an application process for temporary traffic control plans. There hasn't been really any guidelines, no written guidelines anyways. In the past, we've received like hand sketched plans, which of course were often difficult to decipher. And then there was a lack of communication between the public and the agencies who are impacted by these closures. Current practices, we still don't have an application. That's what this policy is in process. We don't have guidelines yet, but we do things more consistently as the construction coordinators have worked together to standardize that. And we do, however, require plans be created by a traffic control supervisor, which is someone who's received a certification to do so. And we stand on the strength of chapter 31 to require those. And we sometimes miss key agencies and sometimes the public when we notify folks about the closures. So what does this policy do? This is a picture of the traffic control near McDonald's not too long ago. And it seems like this intersection keeps getting hit with regular shutdowns. So this kind of provides some context for why we need a policy. So this policy seeks to establish an orderly means by which streets within the city of Lewiston may have temporary traffic modifications made while minimizing the disruption to the traveling public. And then of course, there's a focus here on communicating between city employees and the applicant and the public and those agencies that we mentioned before. The policy also provides a framework for enforcing the requirements of chapter 31:17. And it does not add to the current code. So we're just still operating underneath the current code when it comes to this policy. Nothing new. Check my notes here. I'm getting ahead of myself. Other requirements out of here is that all the devices must conform to the MUTCD. That's based on chapter 31:17. And this has historically been enforced through our current right-of-way permit for any work that is done in the right-of-way. All right, so jumping into the policy itself a little bit, I'll give you an overview, discuss some of the parts and pieces of it, and then I'll show you an example of the right-of-way permit. So the right-of-way permit process is currently an applicant would come in, they want to do work in the right-of-way. We would tell them you have to have a permit for that. They apply for the permit. Engineering would take a look at that and say, okay, you also need to do a traffic control plan for us because your work's going to be obstructing traffic. and we would keep the process moving forward. The applicant would then fill out an online application. I provided a handout that I believe was in your packet of what that information would look like. Then there would be a review by engineering. Any comments we had, corrections, we'd go back. They would reply back to us. As soon as we got that approved, an automated email would be sent to all of those various local agencies that we discussed. So, you know, we wouldn't be forgetting anyone anymore. That would be a set list that everybody gets it every time. And then our public information officer would determine at what level the public needed to be communicated with, and it would move from there. One other vision of this is that there, in my mind, there would be a GIS app that would be able to be accessed through a smartphone or any other means of the internet. You could go on there and you could look at where are the closures in Lewiston currently. And you could just look it up, pull it up, and there would be all of the areas highlighted of here's where the closures are. You could click on them and it would say, here's when it's supposed to open, here's how long it's closed, that type of stuff. And maybe what the project is. We'll see how sophisticated we can get with that. Next, on to some of the parts and pieces. So the city code, of course, we've talked about the MUTCD, that is the manual for uniform traffic control devices. It's kind of the law of the land as far as placing traffic control in the right of way. We developed some guidelines for the traffic control, temporary traffic control. Of course, that online application that I mentioned, and then the existing right of way permit. So here's those guidelines that I mentioned over in the packet. I just threw them out here so that you could see it. We discussed the how long each classification of street takes for review. So how long does staff get to review after the application comes in? And then also how long does the public get notified in advance of a closure? This is a sample information required for the online application. I developed this first, and then the idea is to mirror this through the online app. So it'd be requiring date, the project, the dates of the closure, when they would start and end. That particular piece of information and holding the contractor to it would have been really helpful, say on Main Street, when we had a contractor who was kind of set up shop and then just stayed in one place and stopped working. Having an end date for his closure could have been a tool to force him to either move on, pack up his stuff, and open up the right of way until he was ready to come back or something. So it has application and gives us some teeth when working with contractors. Then the existing right-of-way permit. This is what a current application would look like. This is one that was filled out in August for review. And then once that is approved, then it moves into something that looks like this. This would be their right-of-way permit that they would be required to be able to demonstrate that they have, with a whole bunch of legal jargon on the back of it that protects the city from liability and requires the contractor to put the right-of-way back the way it is supposed to be according to our standards. I think that's everything, as long as I didn't skip some of my notes. So I would stand available for any questions if anyone has them.
So this directly is because customers, oh my gosh, sorry, I was at work, new frame of mind here. Citizens have been frustrated by just not the lack of notices, right? From roads closing, and we're trying to partly.
I think it will help with that. I know there has been some lack of, notification, that those kinds of things. I think it will help with that with the public. It's a big portion of it is notifying like the life services, so EMS and those types of people. Sometimes we don't let them know that a road's closed, and they should know,
Right.
so that they can take a different route.
Right.
So sometimes that occurs, and then also there's just the the need to be able to say to contractors coming in and be able to support city staff when it comes to someone coming in and say, hey, I want to close this street tomorrow. You know, like we had somebody come in and say, hey, 11th Avenue, I'm going to close it tomorrow. I'll just have it closed for 2 weeks, no big deal. We went, no, right?
That's a big deal.
Right, but we don't have anything currently to set before a contractor and say, here's your guidelines. Like, if you want a closure, you're out for, minimum 24 hours for residential, 48 hours for a collector, 5 days for an arterial. And that gives us a little bit more control for the application process and then the review time as well, because some of these, a closure of 11th Avenue is relatively simple compared to if you're trying to close down, say, Vineyard or Bryden, right? And so it just kind of depends on circumstances and giving staff a set time to review so that it protects the contractor from staff taking too long, protects staff from the contractor saying, hey, I need this in 12 hours. It's just puts everybody on the same playing field.
Yeah, okay, because before it just, you have so many different groups that might need to close a road down because of construction jobs and stuff, and it was just hard to manage, I'm assuming that.
There's just no set process.
That process.
I mean, anybody who works with us regularly knows, but
Right,
if you come in cold, we had nothing to hand you to say, this is what you need to do.
that's good, awesome, I like it, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so if I heard you right on one of those first slides, that the review of the right-of-way application actually triggers the need or the response to the review of the application would say you guys have to submit a full plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'd probably add a check or something that says traffic control plan required.
Okay.
And if they check that, then they would need to submit it.
So does it, I guess the question I have related to that is kind of follow-up, is does they're submitting a right-of-way application and they know that they're gonna need a traffic control plan. Is there a reason to decouple it from the right-of-way application itself?
Yeah,
I mean, I guess the question is, are we creating uncertainty for applicants that maybe they don't, like you said, they're coming in cold, they don't know that a traffic control plan is required?
right. I think that's a really good question. We'll probably issue some sort of guidance that says, assume it's required until proven otherwise or something. Because most of the time, if you're doing work in the right of way, you'll need to demonstrate that you don't need to provide temporary traffic control. This might not exactly be your question, but I'm going to answer it anyway because it's in my head. In the right of way permit process, we don't have any notification capabilities with that currently. And with the online application of the traffic control closure plan, we would be able to automate that where once we push approve, then it would automatically email all of those agencies. So that's why instead of making it kind of one long application, IT wants to have it on its standalone online thing so that once you click approve, then it goes out through a automated process instead of trying to do it through email or something.
So, yeah, so I guess my comment on that would then be that on the right of way application, maybe include, when is a traffic control plan required?
Mhm.
So that they know, hey, I'm filling out this application. We know there's another step. You can reference this policy or whatever that policy ends up being, so that it's very clear, like. You submit this right of way application, you're gonna do work here, and it's gonna impact traffic.
Yep.
This will be required, and here, maybe some basic guidance on what that looks like. Like, traffic control plan must be submitted by a TCP or a PE, as an example.
Yeah, that's great feedback. We'll make sure we get something like
That
that.
type of stuff, just so that it's
Clear up front.
clear up front.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like it.
Very good, thank you.
Another question I had. I see consequences for violation is blank. Is that because we're kind of trying to determine if it's necessary to have any violations?
That's because I didn't have it filled out when it went to you.
What's that?
So Haley and I went back and forth on this a bit. I can't remember what version went out to you guys, but we were trying to figure out what part of code would institute someone being required to adhere to this. I think where we're currently pointed is if you construct in the right of way currently without a permit, that is the penalty provision of section 1, chapter 1-7, I think of code requires there's like a fine of up to $1,000 a day, potential misdemeanor, and jail time later, I think is what 1-7 outlines. Obviously, we're not planning on jailing anybody,
Yeah, so that's
unless
good.
it's a really, really, really bad breach of protocol, but generally, that would be the provision we fall back on as far as authority for penalties, but we don't have those outlined currently. Generally, what happens now is somebody drives by and say, hey, so-and-so is working in the right of way. We say, hey, go tell them they need to come in and get a permit. They come in, they get a permit, we issue it, then they go back and work in the right of way.
Yeah,
So-
only if they were if they were just like, we don't want to get a permit kind of thing.
Yeah,
You're
someone-
gonna give them the chance to be like, this is something we need from you. Oh, didn't realize, let's get it fixed.
Yeah, and that's staff, we only have maybe 1 or 2 repeat offenders. And even though they're repeat offenders, we still haven't ever enforced 1-7.
Okay.
We've just kind of continued to work with them and they keep taking baby steps. So we keep working with them and they're getting closer and closer all the time.
Okay. At least you're
So
making progress.
yeah, I would say if anything, staff probably errs on the side of being overly patient.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, because we also want to be obviously construction business friendly too, so we don't want to be like, don't do stuff in Lewiston because they're gonna, like car parking
You're
you.
gonna throw you in jail.
Yeah, they're gonna throw you in jail if you do anything wrong.
Yeah, so I mean, if I can bounce a couple of ideas off of you, in my mind, I think what consequences for violation will look like is try to outline a little bit of the process of city staff makes a phone call, tells the person they need it. If the person refuses to come in and get it, we notify them by letter or some written form of communication. Hey, if you don't, section 1-7 applies. They still refuse to come in. And then we kick it to legal and say, hey, 1-7 needs to be applied to this situation.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
something that outlines kind of here's what we would do,
Yeah.
as
give them
opposed
a
to,
notice.
yeah. I would not want to just say, hit 1-7, right?
Yeah,
Cite them for a misdemeanor, like, no, that's not,
extreme cases before we do that.
yeah.
And then the road closure, that, I'm assuming that does not mean if there was an accident on the road and the, police are like, we gotta cut the road off because,
Right,
someone's
emergency
in the road.
situations don't apply.
Okay, at all.
Water main breaks, car
Yeah.
accidents, utility power poles down in the right of way. Like, we're not gonna make Avista get a 5-day notice for a power line across.
I didn't ask because,
Yeah.
making sure.
Because, yeah, that was the first thing we were like, well, we can't paint this too tight.
Yeah, I gotta leave room for, emergency situations. That makes sense.
Yeah, did I not? I'm questioning now. I thought we had it in here.
You just said if an emergency closure is necessary to protect the safety of the public, a closure shall be performed with the input and help of the city traffic division and police department. So I was just confused whether that was like, now they have to like go through this process.
No,
I
don't,
think I misread it, but,
that maintains the status quo as far as emergency closures go.
okay, yeah, and then it said if necessary, a formal application shall be submitted at the earliest opportunity and review will be prioritized.
Right. So that's, say, a water main blows up in the middle of one of our busier streets and the whole thing has to be shut down. They perform the emergency closure, they get to work. And then as engineering, we would come alongside and assist and say, oh, hey, here's how we're gonna detour people. And then we would complete that closure and we would get something on the books because, maybe that water main break, depending on how serious, could be closed down for a week or something like that.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Follow up, so a couple of things. So we had. Is approval of the right of way permit contingent on approval of the traffic control plan? And the reason I ask that is if there's already teeth in the right of way process and requiring that approval prior to work in the right of way. Or go with that, like you could kind of refer to the teeth within that too.
That would be my plan,
Okay.
would be to, require the temporary traffic control policy or plan before issuing any permitting.
Gotcha. Okay. So if they were working without a traffic control plan, they also would do that.
Yes. Yeah, we should never see it the other way around. Although, there are gonna be circumstances where someone comes in and it's a wide street and they're close, they're gonna be doing in the parking lane and they're doing some work on the sidewalk. They're not closing anything down. And then they, I don't know, come in and dump a big old truckload of material and it spreads out into the traffic lane and suddenly you condense traffic into this narrow side path where we could go, hey, you can't either push it over or come in and get a traffic control plan put together.
I didn't have one. And it's back on another subject, but if you could have a slogan like call before you dig and put out those kind of things on all of the utility bills. And I come up with a slogan just like that. And before you dig, you call us, not dig, but if work in the right of way begins with your call to us or something.
Yeah.
And
Put
then
some, we'll put some thought into that. I'll float that past staff and someone might have something creative. That's not my strong suit.
it's not like- that's a good point though.
People don't realize there is a right of way line.
And what is a right of way?
Yeah,
Right.
and surprisingly, it is sometimes very close to your house. And typically we don't really worry if it's a foot or two back, but there's people who've constructed some interesting structures that
I water those trees out there. It should be mine.
Or I've parked there for 20 years.
Yeah, that, yes, definitely. Anyway, any other questions?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, did you have, you just have to speak up.
I've been trying, but I've been trying to be respectful of all the other commissioners since I can't go through the chair. So I was trying to text over to Haley to say when there was a moment to let me know, because I know we have to go through the chair.
He wasn't getting that
Oh,
either.
we need to find maybe a better way. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Hi, Lucas, it's Laura. You know, I have a ton of questions and things like that. So, bear with me. Because I've seen a lot of, over my tenure, I have seen a lot of different types of like traffic control plans. One of the things I would really like a recommendation for is maybe a checklist for a traffic control plan. So contractors and stuff have sort of a, and they're out there. There's like a checklist, kind of walk people through about hours of operation, construction, devices, if there's a signal involved, things like pedestrians, things like that. So that's kind of one of the reasons why, even when you kind of think, well, maybe it doesn't affect maybe the traffic, they're doing something on the side, it kind of does sometimes if pedestrians or bicycles or whatnot. So sometimes you need signage and things like that so that you can direct people and other things as part of that traffic control plan. So that's a big part of this as well. And then I'm kind of, you know, the policy still has a lot of work to do. So I'm hoping it's going to come back, because I would like to see some of these other items like that question and answer, all those types of things. But I do have some concerns with just kind of, it's very, there's a lot of details sort of missing, if that makes sense. And then I'm trying to figure out how that ties into the city's encroachment permit, or if there's a way to kind of maybe meld the two so that it's not confusing to folks. Because I read through the encroachment permit that the city of Lewiston has, and it seems to always go back to the vaults or something. And then it does talk about right of way and things of that nature. So that part kind of got confusing for me, and I could see where it might be confusing for a contractor. So some sort of maybe streamlining the whole process into one, because usually an encroachment permit is some sort of utility. Sometimes it's not, but they use sometimes an encroachment permit onto a city right away. If you can, you know, so it kind of depends on how that's observed, if that makes sense. So I kind of wish sometimes you would have the presentation maybe ahead of the policy, then let us maybe look at the policy or something like that, and then maybe come back with comments, because I would like to see a final version of this. It's kind of hard because I have like a zillion questions, but like you said, you didn't have this section, you don't have that section yet. And so I kind of want to see some more, but I just threw a lot out there at you. So if you want to kind of answer a little bit of that, maybe look at some different traffic control plans that have maybe a little bit more detail. And I do totally recommend a checklist.
Yeah, I like the idea of a checklist for them. We've got some kind of just basic guidelines outlined currently in the guidelines for temporary traffic control. However, like you said, there's a lot of details in the plan that we could say, hey, did you address, you know, this list of things, and you covered a good healthy amount of those. That's for the good. And then I would address the encroachment permit. So encroachment permits are for everyone else's benefit, for when we've got a situation where someone wants to place some type of structure in the right of way. Or it could be a utility. Typically, we don't allow private utilities in the public right of way for obvious reasons. But if we were going to allow it, it would include an encroachment permit. But those are kind of their own separate animal on a case by case basis, dependent on, you know, hey, we've got an easement across someone's property and they want to place a retaining wall in it. And we'll sell them, well, you can't make that solid concrete, make it a block wall, and we'll consider it, those types of things. Whereas the right-of-way permit is designed to address any work that's being done in the right-of-way. And the right-of-way permit is what would be tied to the temporary traffic control policy, so that we've got those that go hand in hand, and kind of like what Ryan was saying earlier, trying to make those so that they're obviously tied together is a really good comment.
Just because, you know, sometimes you say you don't have a lot of private contractors, but sometimes you don't think of utilities. Sometimes people refer when there's tree contractors coming in and trying to remove tree limbs or something around that, and they have to block part of the street. Sometimes it's a broadband company or an internet company, and they have to, you know, maybe put a small trench within the city's right of way. And then you have you go back to your design your specification, your design guidelines that say, okay, if you're going to put a, 2-inch trench, you need to make sure that it overlays, 1 foot so that the paving or something doesn't interfere with the, paving on the street. There's so many different ways of going about that. So that's why I was kind of, you see where I'm going with kind of getting a little bit more specifics, maybe even kind of looking at the encroachment and the traffic so that the two are kind of either together or separate. I think blended is better so that there's maybe so there's an understanding, which one do I grab now?
Yeah, we'll try to blend them better. As far as the comment on, so a lot of the specifics for how the right of way has to be put back, we don't cover specifically in the permit on purpose, because we've got a blanket statement in the right of way permit that requires adherence to our standards when things go back. And so our standards are there for folks to go look at and figure out. And if they come in and pull a permit like they should, then we help outline those for them up front, just as we work with them one-on-one. But
noticing that but also kind of noticing that back into whether it's in the policy and or the checklist, just so they know, keep this in mind when you come pull that permit and all that bit. We have design guidelines, and so this is what you're going to have to adhere to.
Yeah, we'll do that for sure. Okay.
So is it a chance that we can kind of see this again? Oops, I'm so sorry. My dog's in the car with us. Sorry. If there's a chance we can see this again, or is that not going to be possible?
I'll leave that up to Dustin. I'm not sure what the plan is.
Sure. I mean, the intent of this is a administrative policy. So as Luke laid out, there's no, at this time, there's no proposed code changes. So it's not going to council. This will be an administrative policy. So, we would like to get it going, but we can bring it back to you in November or December, and you guys can.
A question.
That would be great. I would like to see it again, just because I'd like to kind of see how it meshes and blends. It's really, in the state it's in right now, it's really hard to make comments. So, because I'm like, okay, well, what about this? What about that? So and I researched it to death, to see what's in Idaho. I've researched, but like I said, in my tenure, I've seen a lot of these different types. So I was trying to see kind of a comparison. So I have, ones that I'm accustomed to and used to, and, things that have been kind of tried and true over the years. So that's why I just want to make sure that it's something that can kind of go out and kind of be kind of clear off the bat, so that I want it to be kind of successful out the door, if that makes sense. And then I really do hope we meet in November, December, because we did last year, and there's just so much to go through. So anyway.
That kind of takes my question. I was going to say, because codes, once it goes to council and you go through the readings and it goes into place, it's a lot harder to then change it. Where in this case, it's not hard
Yeah, and
To
this is
change
more of a, if
Right.
for whatever reason we adopt this and this is out there for a year and we get contractors that say, show me where it says in the code. And because we adopt the MUTCD, so that's our code. But if there's
Correct.
something in there like, we get contractors and the threat of a misdemeanor is not getting it across, and we need to come up with some sort of an enforcement policy. That needs to be codified, so that needs to go to the council, so
Right.
that type of stuff needs to be that route. This is more of like, how long does the city need to review this? We're gonna say 24 hours as an administrative policy. If for
Correct.
whatever reason somebody says, show me where that says in the code, we're like, okay, now we'll adopt this by ordinance.
So,
And just go, I could just want to finish this thought real quick, is that I have not really seen these ever go before a council body. Sometimes they will go through and they will codify certain things, maybe like you said, times, but the majority of the time they don't, because there could be kind of some special circumstances where you need to work with them because of another contractor in the area. So I like the idea of having latitude for that, and that an administrative policy can be changed and updated on a website quickly.
this seems too like something that you could get out there, but then have a comment section from them saying, if you have an issue with this form or you want to tell us where areas you can improve, then they can adapt it as you go to make sure it works for those that are going to be using it.
Yeah, I mean, as we were drafting this, my biggest concern, my hope is that this helps of everything. I'm not really necessarily concerned about enforcement, because as Luke said, we don't have much of an enforcement issue. It's an education of like, oh, no, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. It's more of what works for the public versus what works for the contractor. So the contractor, I mean, the case in point would be all the work that was going on at the courthouse, and everything was borderline emergency, because this is gonna be tied in here, and we've got two other private developments that are going on, and a lot of times they cross. And it has been, it continues to be problematic on all of this stuff. And so when we're trying to hold we hold them, Main Street's an arterial, you gotta notify us in 5 days. So we can have, utility billing at the city and license plates at the county, and the businesses, they all are aware of the closures and detours and everything else. And so we can get everything set up, versus the contractors like, I have to get this done now. And so we're trying to find that balance. And so that's one where 5 days might be too long. It might be too short. I don't know. So trying to get this out and trying to get that balance between what the public needs to know and how they can react versus a contractor that's like, their job is to get that job done.
I don't see a problem with getting it out there and then bringing it back. And if changes need to be made, you can make changes. Or if this is out there and those that are using it are like, this is too long, or this is kind of causing a hindrance on us, then you can revisit it and change it. It's not a hard document to change as far as what
Yeah.
you're saying. So I don't see a point in holding on to it. But I'm not really seeing it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is we need to get something out the door just so that we've got it in place and starting to work off of it, and then we'll continue to put meat on the bones. Like any good policy, you kind of start enforcing something and then make
Especially as
adjustments.
the winter months are coming up, which makes it even harder for people driving safely and not running into things.
Any other comments? It was all good.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
Okay. And I hope it stays, thank you. All the feedback you might get, I don't know. I'm just saying.
It's always thank you. We value the feedback we get, because then it gives us a chance to get better.
It does help you to get it to the right spot. Yes.
Good way to look at it.
Okay, unfinished and new business. Commissioners' comments? Comments should not be related to any item currently before the commission or an item that may come from the commission in the foreseeable future, and should be limited to comments, not discussion. Do we have any?
I do.
Okay,
First want to ask, we do not plan to bring like 21st Street and the construction we did on it up again, do we?
Not unless something goes wrong.
Okay, because I just want to make sure I'm not, come before the council at any time. I have gotten feedback on the coating that has been put on 21st Street. And it's been positive. People have felt like it's a lot easier to drive on, tremendous improvement from what it was. And so I just wanted to share that. And I'm not sure if you guys get any feedback on things, but
I did get quite a few, I mean, the problem with that project was it was intended to be all done in the fall and the schedule lapsed. And so we did the quality patching and all the nasty digging and stuff in the fall, and then it went over the winter. And so everybody thought that's what the city did to
Yeah.
fix it. And so I got a lot of phone calls and emails and comments that was just terrible. But when we came back, we did the pedestrian ramps, we did the overlay, mill-in overlay, and now it's done. Well, excluding one ramp in front of Sharps that needs to be, that's a warranty, or a punch list item. So one ramp that needs to be completed, it's done. And so, yeah, after that, I think people have been more positive and more happy with the work. So I was fairly confident it would turn out like this. The test will be what's it look like in 6 years, what's it look like in 10 years, how long will this last? So the selling point on this product was it will not rut like regular asphalt.
Right.
And so we won't get those massive ruts going down 21st. So we will, it looks good, but we need to plan for the full reconstruction in 10 to 20 years.
right, yeah, that's still in the plans. Awesome. It looks great for right now.
Yes.
So
It's very nice.
exciting. At least we feel like we're doing something. The citizens feel like we're doing something, get things done.
Any other commissioner comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to staff liaison comments. Comments should not be related to items currently before the commission or an item that may come before the commission in the foreseeable future, and should be limited to comments, not discussion. Do we have any staff liaison comments?
The only thing I would say for that is I just looked at my calendar, we're scheduled for the November 20th, which is the week before Thanksgiving. It's the Wednesday before, and then December 18th is obviously the week before Christmas. So I think we may send out a poll if anybody's planning on being out, just to make sure that there's no anybody, the board doesn't have extended travel plans, so we can't get a quorum. We won't even move forward on a packet, but
So it's the day before Thanksgiving.
it's the week before
Week
Thanksgiving.
before,
Yeah.
on a Wednesday.
On a Wednesday.
I'll
So
be-
we should be good there. I don't love my family that much to be traveling, to be with them for a week and a half for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, usually it's that first week we're busy and I should be here.
Yeah, okay.
I'll be here.
So we will probably bring back the traffic control policy either November, December, and then I'll keep you in the loop as we look at amending the future agenda items.
I might have to rescind that. I expect to be, I have eye surgery on the 13th, and it's a double type of surgery on both eyes. So it's not all that bad, but if I'm not gonna look beautiful and I may not feel like I want to be up and about, so, but I will be in town, so if there was a quorum issue, I will be here, okay, so you let me know that.
Well,
Thank you.
Zoom still counts, right? If she needed to zoom in.
And see if we can get the vice to be here. Yes, thank you. Other than that, okay, we move on to turn the page. Ta-da. Future agenda items.
Look like we have a lot.
I think so.
I think we're good.
I think we're good. And then next, adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Can we ask about agenda items or bring up items
Yes,
for?
yeah, the future agenda items.
Yes.
Yes,
I
you look to
didn't
Dustin,
necessarily,
not to me.
yeah, I didn't necessarily see it. I know we discussed it or brought it up briefly at the last one. And I guess it is in here, the development code piece of that.
Yes.
That was kind of a hot topic last.
Yeah,
last time we were here.
the development code rewrite is. I was tentatively planning to have that in front of the council on November. So we'll probably schedule it in December. My original plan was to have it in November, get some general feedback from the council and then bring it to this body. But the work session for November is pretty full and it's a pretty meaty subject. So I didn't want to kind of squish it in there. So now it will be December. So that will be probably, I want to get it in front of the council first because I've got broad, like, policy wise, what do you want to see here? And then I can take that and bring it to this board and say, here's what they said, here's what the code says. How do we do that? So, yeah. So that will, yeah, either be December or January.
Okay, all right, so we have a motion to adjourn. Been moved and seconded.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Great. Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, folks. You did a good job. We're on time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were late. I'm sorry. I'm not used to being the one that's holding the quorum. I forgot about it.
But you did